Welcome to our webinar, this Lunch and Learn session on the use of AI and data in projects. I'm Andy Murray. I'm the chair of the APM's governance group and also the executive director of the Major Projects Association. I'm just going to do a short introduction in a moment, and then I'll bring our panelists in to give their insights and thoughts on different aspects of how we can better use AI and data on our projects. So I'll do my brief introduction first. I just wanted to set out by, everyone's using AI, and there's, you only have to look on LinkedIn and see some of the articles and discussions on there that it seems to be an overused term. So what we really want to do is to perhaps cut through some of that in this webinar today. And when I say everyone's using AI, that's probably mostly at home, whether that's through productivity apps on your phone, through the recommendations that you receive on Netflix or Amazon, the customer service bots that you interact with your utility or insurance providers or other providers, or even the tech in your car, such as lane departure warning systems. So you're not immune from the use of AI, but we're not using it as much in work. And certainly the project world is using it much less than the sort of business as usual or the operations part of work. And that's mostly due to the long cycle times of projects and the fact that projects involves different organizations or different parts of organizations, so data tends to be siloed. So we sort of suffer from what I call data poverty as well. And what's interesting, at a recent conference I attended, it's an operations conference, an internal conference, I asked if they would just put their hands up, those who were using ChatGPT by way of example, at home, and almost every single hand went up in that audience. So people were dabbling with large language models. I asked them to keep their hands up if they were using it in the workplace, and only 3 hands stayed up. And interestingly, sort of the head of data security was sort of scanning the room to find out who those 3 people were. So we know there's a disparity at the moment between how we're using this technology at home and in the office. We're not at a standing start, though. The APM, in collaboration with others, has been exploring this topic through a data analytics and AI working group. I'm on that working group, and it's been busy. So in 2021, it commissioned a study by Warwick Manufacturing Group, part of the business school there, which looked at the opportunities and the barriers for using AI and data analytics in projects. And interestingly, that was the first time we really had some definitions about how we use it in our project context that have been repeated and built upon since. We often refer to that report as the barriers report, because although it was looking at the opportunities, it highlighted barriers for things like just being sort of fearful or apprehensive, but mostly around the data issues and the data literacy and the skills that we need to sort of get the opportunities from them. And in 2022, we published, the APM with the working group, published a Getting Started guide in data analytics, and then we supported the publication of a manifesto that James Garner will be talking about a little later. And in 2023, a skills guide as a companion to the Getting Started guide was published as well. And then more recently, a joint paper with my organisation, the MPA, the IPA, the Central Digital and Data Office, and the Number 10 Data Science Unit, published a paper on the use of AI and data for government project delivery, and Karina will be talking a bit about that in a moment too. So all these reports and guides can be found on the APM website, and further information on .gov.uk and also the Project Data Analytics Task Force website. So there's a lot out there, and it's interesting that those are sort of incremental and building up our understanding about the opportunities. So hopefully today's webinar will nudge a few more of you to take your first step, or perhaps further steps in finding ways in which AI and data can help your project or your organization's project management capability. So through reflections from our 4 great panelists today, we're first going to look at the use of AI and data analytics, where it's already making an impact, and sort of give some examples. Then we're going to look at how the world of projects can catch up with other disciplines and sectors through a more considered approach to how we sort of take up that adoption with it. So I'm going to kick off first with James White. So James, if you can do a quick introduction and then sort of give your sort of shared experience. But James, you're going to look at sort of challenges that we have in the project world an example of how you've used, or one of your clients has used, AI to overcome one of them, that particular one around schedule predictability. So James, over to you, and then I'll bring in the others after you've finished.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I've been in the nuclear world for 10 years, in specifically in project management, mainly on submarines, radioactive waste, and now for consultancy, MIGSO where I'm head of nuclear. What I'd like to share with you today is just take you on a very short story of where conventionally we've been with project management, and where that's now taking us in the future, and the exciting times that AI is allowing us to support our clients in more effective project delivery. There we go. So there's 3 tiers to the slide that I'm going to build up in my narrative here. The first one is pretty straightforward. So it's the conventional challenges that we face in the delivery of our projects, and you'll recognize each of the 3 points that I highlight here. So the challenges we face are clearly the late running and overspending of projects. And just to put a bit of context to that, the government major project portfolio at the minute sits at around 244 projects, and that has a value of £804 billion, so just below £1 trillion. That pipeline of those 244 projects has delivery with time and to cost of 1 in 200 landing on the original cost and forecasted time. So that's a 0.5% statistic. Now you take that metric wider to industry, and you're landing on around 30%. So there's a 0.5% with GMPP projects, and about 30% with industry landing on the original baseline, business case, time and cost. And those challenges, you can dig into what's driving that. And you can see my other 2 points on there: reoccurring delivery issues and siloed project management. And the reason I've highlighted those, because the next tier down, so the traditional solutions that we bring in to support those challenges, from a consultancy perspective or from an internal delivery point of view, are the 3 highlighted on here. What corrections can we do to improve that project delivery against those challenges? Without listing what they are, whether it's augmenting staff, data maturity on the P3M3 scale, where are we from all the governance that sits behind improving those challenges? Well, so the next layer down is where I wanted to take this conversation. So the solutions that AI can now bring to the table, which my next slide will highlight, but what I wanted to show you is some of the solution of predicting what that forecasting is with using AI is really a game changer in the world that we're in, against those challenges, that the perspectives that I highlighted at the beginning. And the interventions that we can now bring to the table are right in front of us. AI are showcasing us what they are, and we can dive into the drivers of these reoccurring delivery issues at the top of the tree here. And we can integrate these systems more effectively using AI to give us these interventions. So the benefit of this, is reducing costs, increasing the project success. If we can make a percentage gain, on this 0.5% of the £804 billion of projects, 1 in 200 of those landing on the original time and cost, percentages of movement is significant cost savings. It's getting those projects delivered on the original time, and what are the benefits being realized earlier. Significant benefits. So this is my second and last slide that I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to sort of talk around the narrative of what this means. So when the project starts, you've got a forecast of completion on there. Now, where AI we are using with one of our global clients that's got approximately 200 live projects internationally running at the minute, circa 200 that have been delivered that we've got data from. So the AI machine learning model is using the projects that have been completed and is monitoring the projects that are in play to give us a 96% accuracy on the predicted outturn of the project time and cost. Now that predictability with a particular client has got a 19% variance between what the projects are forecasting and what the AI is forecasting. So there's a 19% variance there. Now, if you times the 19 to the 96, there's a potential saving of 18%. Now, it doesn't offer you that 18% savings unless you engage with what it's suggesting that's driving that 96% accuracy on future time and cost. You can then intervene with what it's telling you, so you can dive down. Now, just to bring out what I mean about diving down, this is a very top-down view at projects. It looks, as we've set it up here with our client, top-down, looking at about 30 different functions within the projects, and two of the obvious ones are time and cost, but it's also looking at the supply chain. Where geographically is the project taking place? Where geographically are the supply chain based? You know, the complexity of the project, the competency of the project staff team, SRO type, you know, those high level metrics, when they're all put into the machine learning and you build up that volume of data, it drives this predictability. On the slide here, it's got 96%. That's actually learning now and offering us a 97% accuracy on the prediction because it's learning. Now, what the interesting thing is from this is, what are the behaviors that are changing? Well, I can see them playing out in front of me right now. That the project managers are now coming to the project boards, the program boards, with change control, saying, you know, I want to adjust my forecast based on what the AI is saying, because it's pretty accurate by 96, 90% accurate. So why won't I back that horse against my original forecast? Because that's what it's telling me, and it's landing on those numbers, you know, time and time again. The machine's learning. So what does that then bring to the table from a behavioral point of view when all these change controls are coming in? Okay, we're not going to talk about that now, but my last point on this, just to drop another seed of thought to the group here, is if we can take another view of all the lessons that are being learned from past projects. So we know that Crossrail, we have got a data set of around 10,000 lessons learned within their data set. You know, Rolls-Royce, on a global scale of manufacturing of the same, you know, and the companies match these volumes of vast volumes of data that contain lessons learned. If we can use the machine learning to say, you know, on an AI to look at these vast volumes, and if we could share those lessons between sectors and industry, and we had a repository of, you know, 1 million lessons on, and then we put in the data that we're delivering a project in this part of the country, it's this duration, it's this cost, it's this type of project, you know, and we used those lessons to say to the project manager, you know, give me 5, give me 10 of the best lessons out of this 100,000 repository of lessons that have been learned. You know, where do I need to really focus to make a difference? You know, that's the power of what AI can bring to the table right now, and this is actually live what's happening, the slide you see on the screen. So thank you. That's what I wanted to share with you today.
Great, thank you, James. And I see we've got a few questions for you that I'll bring in when we get around to the Q&A session. So I'm going to hand over to another James now, so James Garner. And James, if you can just explain, you don't need to be called James to work on AI and data. But if you can give us some examples of what's happening sort of right now and sort of that look into the future, what we can really do. I think you made a comment the other day to me that the future is already here. So please give us your provocations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. I'm just going to share my screen, and I thought that was the reason I was invited, just because I shared the name. But it's great to be here, and what I'm going to do is you're going to see me twice. I'm going to talk a bit about examples, and then a bit later to talk about my role in the Project Data Analytics Task Force. So I work for Gleeds, and I'm going to give you some examples of how we're using AI at Gleeds. And as you said, Andy, I think a lot of people don't realize that they're already using AI. It's something that is surreptitiously starting to find its way into a lot of the tools we use. I mean, Google Maps is a good example, or your Netflix account. So I'm very lucky to work for an organization that is embracing AI, although very responsibly, and all the challenges that go with the ethics and the data security that go with it are paramount concern. I'm also the chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force, and I'll talk a bit about that a bit later, about what we've been doing. Obviously, Andy, you're part of that group as well. But in this session, I just really wanted to give some real examples. But before I do that, this quote I've put up on the screen really kind of speaks to me, because this is the CEO of Alphabet, who are the parent company of Google. And when he makes a statement like this, you do have to sort of listen when he says artificial intelligence will have a more profound impact on humanity than fire, electricity, and the internet. And what's interesting about this is those kind of innovations that have happened throughout humanity, they're speeding up. To go to what's called mass adoption, it took a long time for electricity to become what's called mass adopted, probably about 50 years. The internet probably took about 20 years from release to point it got mass adopted. Whereas ChatGPT, we're talking about, by the same measure of mass adoption, took a matter of months. So the speed that these kind of innovations are starting to take hold is the thing that is changing. So innovations have always happened throughout humanity, but the speed of it means that we hardly feel like we've got time to kind of catch breath. But what I would say is it's all around experimenting, jumping in, having a go, not feeling like it's something that isn't your business, because you will be using artificial intelligence in a lot of the things that you already do. And this was my kind of way of bringing AI into the things that we do in Gleeds, to kind of give people some comfort that this isn't a technology to be scared of, or something which is set that we have to kind of put aside from everything else. Yes, we have to tread with care, but in a way it's no different from the implementation of the internet sort of 20, 25 years ago, as people started thinking about how we can use that. And the reason we're doing it, and this is so important, and when Karina talks later about the paper the IPA have produced, this is all around trying to drive us up this value chain so that we can start getting this predictive and prescriptive analytics out of data. Kind of going on from what you were talking about, how can we actually use the data from past projects to help us deliver projects, so we can get away from that statistic that you mentioned, the 1 in 200 projects finishing satisfactory. There's got to be a better way of doing it. So that's why, and I think it's really important to talk about them before you go into the examples, because otherwise it just feels like technology for the sake of it. And that's certainly not what we're doing here. This isn't using technology for the sake of it. This is about exploring using a new technology to help us deliver projects better. So, the generative AI revolution, because AI has been around for yonks, really. You could look at your thermostat as a type of AI, but the difference is this generative AI, which means things that generate some kind of content, whether that's a report, whether that's like ChatGPT, some text or an email, or it can be music. And I'm not going to go into all the examples now, but because I want to move on to the examples that we've got. But there are examples within Adobe. So if you're a graphic designer, you'll have noticed that Photoshop has now integrated generative design within it. If you're using Excel or Word or any other of the Microsoft suite, which I'm sure most of you are, you'll find over the coming months, you'll switch on one day, there'll be this new thing called Copilot. All that is an AI feature. And this is what I kind of was talking about by saying it's very, very difficult to say that you're going to be making a decision on AI, because a lot of it is just going to be integrated into the tools that we already use. So those are worth checking out. Even within architecture and engineering, there's something called Revit, which utilizes machine learning and starting to utilize large language models to help you have a conversation around things. So I'm just going to skip through these very quickly, because I did want to talk about some other examples. So the Project Data Analytics Task Force champions is the hackathons that we put on. And various hackathons that go around. If you don't know what hackathon is, it's a way of bringing people together for innovation, effectively, to solve real life challenges. And this is just one example of the kind of thing that can be produced in a hackathon. And these hackathons can be 1 day or 2 days at most. And you can come away with some real life examples using AI and using technology to solve real life challenges. And this was one example of using machine learning on schedules and estimates. The reason I wanted to show you this was because this isn't necessarily technology that's out there just for kind of, tech entrepreneurs. This is stuff that the entry barrier to get into AI is getting smaller and smaller all the time. And this is something that you can upskill yourself so that you or your teams can start actually producing AI tools. I want to quickly show you now some of the stuff that we've developed within Gleeds, and it's going to be a very quick whistle stop. But one of the things we've done is we're obviously quantity surveyors, so we do a lot of quantity surveying and project management, but we wanted to understand what's happening out there in terms of the price of materials and the price of labour. So this actually came out of a hack. So it started life on the hack. We came out with a sort of rudimentary version, and then we were able to basically prove the concept in the hack, and then we were able to productionize this. And this uses AI, machine learning, and web scraping technology to be able to look at over 20,000 products out there in the market and give our surveyors a view of what's happening, not on a monthly basis or 6 monthly basis, on a daily. This is updated daily, so they can see what's going on. So when we're doing estimates for clients, we've got this information at our fingertips where we can look at certain materials. And it's not so much about materials, it's more about looking at trends. So we can have sensible conversation with contractors and builders around what's happening out there. But it's not just materials, it also looks at labor. So we could, this example was bricklaying, you can see where there's spikes. And there's no more guesswork involved. So going back to the graph, that predictive, prescriptive analytics, you're able to start making real predictions. And then, we also provide other information in there around the general economy. The other thing that we've done is we've started using the things like large language models, ChatGPT, but we fine-tuned it. So rather than just use information out there, we provide our people with the ability to have a conversation with our market reports. So you could say, what are the hot topics in the UK market? And so much like ChatGPT, it will provide you an answer, but you won't get this answer from ChatGPT. This has been what's called fine-tuned, and we're starting to create different modules over different things. So it's that early stage, it's that beta stage, but we are doing that. Another thing we've done is on our data, we're able to use that to provide reports. So this is an example on education projects, but we can do it for all kinds of projects where we can start using that data to start estimating what the predicted costs are, what the predicted duration is, what the predicted delta is maybe from the final account. And all this just provides, it doesn't take away from the professional responsibility, but provides people with ammunition and information to help them do their job better. But the last thing I want to show before I hand over is none of this is kind of easy without recognizing that we need to upskill. And there's the soft skills around this as well, which I know Karina will touch on later. And we also have recognized that. And so we have offered to all of our staff the ability for them to upskill data literacy. That could be anything from a kind of lunch and learns that we regularly run, all the way through to level 5, 6 data science qualifications, and making sure that wherever people are on their kind of data maturity journey, there's an entry point. Just a couple of other things. There's things like the AI-powered schedule planning for anyone who's really enjoys sort of time boxing. But the last thing I want to show, there's other examples out there in the market. There's a company called Nplan and a company called Nodes and Link, who are really starting to integrate AI into their service offerings. So they're calling it like AI-assisted consultancy. And I think something to be aware of, because the kind of traditional way of doing things is now being changed by these kind of startups entering the market and changing the way that they can deliver, you know, kind of what we would have called traditional consultancy services before into something delivered in a slightly different manner. So like I say, just a very quick whistle-stop tour through how we're practically using it within our organisation. I'll hand back to you now, Andy.
Great, thank you, James. And likewise, you want to have a quick scan of the questions. There's quite a few have been popping in as a result of you demonstrating the sort of the art of the possible already today. The future is sort of with us now. So I'd now like to move our focus, our attention to how we're going to make use of all of this in a sort of in a more sort of coherent way. How can we sort of drive up that adoption? As I mentioned right in my beginning, you know, we're a bit behind the curve compared to how AI and data analytics is being used by other disciplines or other sectors. So, Karina, as you sort of head up with that responsibility across government, I'm going to put that question to you. So how do we make it coherent? What are we doing to drive up that adoption?
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you very much, James and James, for your insight there. And hello, everybody. I'm not a James. I'm Karina. I'm Karina Singh. I'm Director of Function, Insight and Profession in the IPA, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, and we are the people who oversee those 244 most complex mega programs that happen across government. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. So there are hundreds and hundreds of other programs that happen below that happen through departments. And we only look at the most complicated, complex ones. And there is a reason why the most complicated, complex ones don't run to plan, is because many of them haven't been done before, so they are novel and they are contentious. So you know, it's a fascinating subject, and like you, I wouldn't call myself an AI expert at all, but it's something that I've been watching with interest, but also have a responsibility to make sure that our people, there are nearly 18,000 people who work in project delivery across government who call themselves project delivery professionals, and over 25,000 people who work in delivering projects within government. Now that's without the supply chain, and as you know, most of what we do we deliver through our supply chain, and I've got a responsibility to make sure those people understand how they can harness the power of AI and are upskilled to do so. So it's a vast subject, and how do we make sense of it, which is what we have been thinking about with Andy in the Major Projects Association and the APM as well, with colleagues in APM. And we published a paper just last week. We have categorized, we think as government, we have got a different role to play because, as you can see from the examples that James and James have used, a lot of the innovation, a lot of the day-to-day things will happen through the market and through the sector. Our role is a bit different. And my role, I think, is to create the conditions for success for that innovation, for us to adopt AI in a safe manner, but also in a sustainable manner. I'm a bit of a skeptic. I don't think, and as seeing some of the questions that have come in the chat, I don't think it's going to, it's not the answer to everything. And at the moment it is coming across as the answer to everything, but I don't think it is. People have got a key role to play. What AI can do, it can help us get to a decision point faster. It can help us get to a solution faster and get better outcomes. So there are 5 things that I want to focus on as government. First of all, how do we build data and skills at scale? How do we equip people with the with the skills they need to harness the power of that data. And that will be dependent on role. And, you know, it was interesting to see what James G was sharing there. You know, depending on your role, if you're a leader in this space, you will need different skills. If you're a planner, you'll need different skills. If you're managing risk, you'll need different skills. But how do we equip you with those skills? How do we help you understand that and navigate that in a fast changing world? And this is the thing that we are focused on in our implementation planning. We're not trying to predict the future, but what we are wanting to do is take a series of no regrets actions to help us, you know, keep pace with how things are going to change. So better data and availability is a really interesting thing. So we look at data from over, you know, 250 programs across projects across government. And even within government, we don't have a single standard way of defining what is a baseline, what is a milestone, you know, how do you define a unit of cost? And we certainly don't share that with our supply chain. And all of the models that we're building now in the project delivery world will be based on a different interpretation of that. And I think that we've got a key role to play as government in helping defining that standard. It's certainly for government projects, if not for wider for the UK supply chain as well. So that's something that we'll be working closely with APM and the project data task force on, is how do we get a clarity about how do we define that data so that we can then pull that data efficiently and actually then trust what it's telling us. Because as we all know, garbage in, garbage out with data. So how do we get data that we can trust? Thirdly is how do we get evidence-based decision making? Really love some of the examples that James used there. I am probably in the IPA sitting on the largest amount of project delivery data across in the UK, and we are not joining that up in the best possible way to drive that insight. You know, we are taking steps to do that now. We are going live with a new system just in the next couple of months that pulls all the data together and puts it all on the same platform, so at least we can join it up and then create insight out of that. What I'd like to do is create better benchmarks, better estimates, and better tools for how we can extract the data from that. And that leads us to experimenting together. You know, there will be lots and lots of fantastic experiments and innovation that is happening across the UK and across the world. In fact, I was talking to somebody in the US government, and they were telling me about some LLM predictive analytics that they're experimenting with at the moment, and they can tell from the reports with 70% accuracy with the reports that are coming through, but just by analysing the wording that a project manager is using to say, yeah, I think we are on schedule. They can tell by the words people are using with 70% accuracy if something is going to move from a green to an amber status or amber to a red status in next month's report. So there's very clever things that are happening there. How do we harness that, and how do we experiment that so that we're not wasting energy as a sector, and then we're scaling and adopting the things that are working for us? And how are we not wasting money and wasting time by not scaling? So that is something that I'm very keen that we work together on as a sector, not just as government, but as a sector. How do we adopt the things that are going to work for us and not just be driven by things that are happening, being provided to us by the big tech providers, which will be good, but they will not be specific to project delivery. And I want something that's specific to project delivery that will help us get better outcomes. And finally, we won't achieve any of this unless we're collaborating together. So it's absolutely key for me that we work across with government, with the professional bodies, and with academia and industry together to share our knowledge, to help each other innovate, and to scale for the best good. So that's our priorities, Andy. And I know that we will want to move on to questions soon. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you. Great,
thank you, Karina. I'm sure we're going to have some questions around these sort of 5 priority themes to set up that condition for success as well. And I think an important point you made around the so that we can perhaps drive some of the agenda rather than having it driven to us, if you like, by the big tech firms as well, which will come with that sort of more global needs than perhaps the UK specific needs. So what I'd like to do now is to move on to Alex. I'll let Alex introduce who you are and where you're from. But Alex, you're going to sort of lift it up a level for us and say, actually, we need to think about a portfolio perspective in terms of that sort of maturity approach to make sure that any ambition that we have is also matched by capability. So over to you for sort of your thoughts on how we can improve adoption of AI and data analytics on projects.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I've been involved in technology within major projects for a lot of years, and really representing a lot of tier one contractors in the energy space. And I think I've spoken about this a lot at different industry events and a number of my peers. And there was this one overriding piece that kept coming back when we started moving up the value chain in terms of adopting technology, is that are we actually seeing projects perform better with the use of advanced technology? And I got to the point that we trialed a number of bits of technology, and I'll give you a quick example. We tried some schedule forecasting, and the answer was our tool can forecast the schedule in particular aspects 3 times more accurately than your schedulers have been doing so. We shared that information with the schedulers, and we reran the test 6 months later, and actually the humans had got to the same level as the machine was predicting. And it got me thinking, because it's actually really important that the people take the action with the insights that they have. And if we go and introduce really high level technology, and people don't take the actions with the new technology, and they didn't take the actions with the old technology, projects don't perform. And so the model, if I can ask you to click through, is all around setting a series of ground rules, a series of simple observations that test our ability, both organizationally and much wider in an ecosystem, as to are we ready to take use of the technology that's available to us? Have we got the right behaviors in our projects teams to actually take the technology and use them in the intent they're given? So just because we get an insight doesn't mean we take the right action with that insight. And this is the fundamental piece that I'm going to come back to. But everyone can see here there's a 5-step maturity model that I've come up with here, and as one matures up from 1 to 5, your ability to perform better at a project level, your ability to predict better at a project level increases. It's actually quite easy to introduce technology on a standalone project. It's actually really, really difficult to do this across a portfolio, even a small number of portfolios, organizationally or even wider. But it's really, really important to set some of these data rules in place right at the very bottom. If you don't get 1 right, the chances are you're not going to get 2 right. The chances are you've got no chance at 3, etc., etc. Now, most of us organizationally have our core project systems pretty well established, and most of us have moved away from Excel, and most of us are using cloud-based tools underpinned by Azure or something like that. Most of us then through the use of Azure and other tools, we're integrating this. We've got a single point of data. We can see how it all flows through. And most of us will be using some form of Power BI style business intelligence to bring all that information to life. But if you're anything like me, you've got 1,000 dashboards on 1,000 different projects, and you're wondering, right, what's my top 3? What if there are any 3 things that I can do this week, what are they? And we're drowning in information. And I think this is the important part, is that if I don't take information at that level and act on it, and if Johnny doesn't, and Susie doesn't, and Pete doesn't, without really high-end technology, why do we think the really high-end technology is going to change how we operate? Why will my CFO invest in what I want to do if they're not seeing a tangible improvement and benefit once we turn these on? And that's the challenge we have. So when we ran that test case of the planners are just as good as the technology, it gets embarrassing, yeah? because we hadn't set the ground rules or the expectations of what we wanted the schedulers to do with the basic technology, the basic things they have available to them. And of all the things that I want to talk around today or take away, it's this level 4. Level 4 for me is you've got a whole bunch of really good stuff. Do your people know what to do with it? Let's give you a really quick example that's not really necessarily AI, but if I was to pass out an estimate to each and every one of us and say, please review that estimate, some people are going to give me 3 comments on it. Yeah, some people are going to give me 33,000 comments on it. The expectations of what I want done are not clear. And we need to think about how to embed the expectations of those actions before we invest in the really high-end stuff. Because if we don't, we're not going to take the action and the high-end stuff to allow our projects to perform better. And it's a really, really, really crucial step that we miss. So if you think about it, every insight that we get from a dashboard, every single insight, how bad does it need to be before we take action? And how long does it need to be bad for before we take action? And then if you think about it as a hierarchy, you know, a junior member of staff, how bad does that need to be and how long does it need to be bad for before they take action is different the higher up the tree you get. So you take a risk example, a high risk that hasn't been actioned for 30 days, that's one thing. A high risk that hasn't been actioned for 90 days is a really important piece of work. And if we're not taking action on that stuff, AI will have a less impactful meaning to our project performance than otherwise it would. We can jump straight to level 5 quite easily, and there's a whole bunch of applications that we should jump to level 5 and just turn it on. But there are other applications that we need a really considered approach. If you don't get people taking the right action at the right time, which is one of the bullet points in my level 4, we don't get these people taking the right action at the right time, project performance will not change. Yeah, there will be better cases to invest in for AI than that type of thing. You need to target it very carefully, and you need to be really considered. If you can't address what action we want people to take consistently, you're probably better putting your money elsewhere. So that sounds all a bit negative. I don't mean it to be that you can jump straight to level 5 with a whole bunch of things, but don't be surprised if your CFO comes back to you and says, I've not seen projects perform. If you don't understand what level 4 is, you're always going to get that. So just a word of caution, a word of insight, I guess, from someone that's been living this particular thing for over 10 years and has been trying to get AI in place for 5 years. You know, there are brilliant success stories, but there are also processes that we need to get right before we really make a step change in difference. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Alex. And I think that really sort of draws a circle back to James White's opening example. That and perhaps I'll let James Garner come in a moment about the task force and the manifesto. But James, I'm going to give you an early question to give you time to think about it. James White, that is, which is your performance chart showed that the 96% of accuracy on a forecast that was generated was actually showing that the portfolio is going to cost 19% more than the experts' forecasts. So that was a massive dose of reality that the CFO in that organization was getting. And I guess when you then put that to an individual project going forward, if they're saying that their project's going to be better than the AI tool that you had on its forecast, you've got to ask why. So how is it going to be better? And what they can't have is that every project in that portfolio being better than average, because by definition they can't be. So there's this sense of reality, and we've got quite a few questions if you would like to scan through them whilst James is doing his next bit around optimism bias, and will sort of the insights that we're getting help us overcome the optimism bias where we all think we're going to be better than average, which can't be true, or whether we're also going to suffer the same where perhaps the algorithms that we have are generating different and new types of bias that we haven't had to date. So perhaps Alex and James, you want to think about those and do a quick scan of the questions whilst James Garner, if you want to just come back in around the future, the adoption part, but wearing your task force chair's hat if you can.
Yeah, of course, and I'll be very quick on this because I can see there's a lot of questions to be answered. So
Yes.
I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the task force. So the task force has been around for a while, and you've been on it for a long time, Andy, and I've got the pleasure of chairing it at the moment. And in some senses, I'm very lucky because I'm chairing it at a time when it's really starting to get into the public consciousness with around AI. And there's some incredible reports starting to support what the task force is doing. There's the report that Karina's team has published, which you'll see very, very nicely kind of supports a lot of what the manifesto talks about. But you've also got this, which is the National AI Strategy. So, you know, even at that kind of top level of government, there is this kind of real belief around the way that AI can improve UK PLC. And I was really pleased to hear at another event I was at recently that the UK is the third, in terms of academic research, the third best in the world, behind only, I believe it was US and China. So we really are leaders in this field, and the report, like the IPA report, things like that, just kind of keep, you know, keeping us at the very edge of where we're going with AI. And the Project Data Analytics Task Force, if you want to go to pdataskforce.com, this is the website, and it's all around just spreading the word, making people feel comfortable, making people understand what the use of data and AI can do for project delivery. So I'll put the URL in the chat afterwards, but feel free to go there and you can subscribe to a newsletter that we do. But within that, there is the manifesto, and I don't think we've got time to play a video, but you can go and see a version of Andy, I think it was about 18 months ago, talking about the manifesto. But actually, it's a very simple concept, and this is why I think it's so good, because a lot of it is based on common sense, and it's all around using data to bust beliefs. And these myths are everything from saying, well, data's got nothing to do with us, to, you know, myths around saying that, you know, the data's only as good as what you put in, which is true to some extent, but that shouldn't be the end of the that you can do to the data to make it fit. Then it's around data enablement, making sure projects are designed and enabled from the beginning. So you starting as you mean to go on, and kind of starting with the end in mind. If you know what you're going to use the data for, then you can make sure you're setting the projects and the portfolios up in such a way that you'll be able to get that data from the beginning. The third one is around sharing data and pooling our data. Unfortunately, within our industry, there's just not enough projects for us to start hoarding our own data. We need to share. We need, and I don't think we're giving away any kind of advantage, because a lot of the data that we have, we don't actually use at the moment. It just sits there, and it'd be much better to use the data to start training algorithms that we trust as an industry, rather than what will inevitably happen. We'll also end up letting the big tech companies provide us with their algorithms, and we'll have no idea what those are trained on. And then that goes very nicely with the data open sourcing and the belief that I think that we should be sharing data and making sure our people, so that we can all use the data. And then fifth, I touched on before, is around data reskilling. Just because we're a project manager or QS or a risk manager doesn't mean data should be part of what we do. It's a very, very important part of what we do. And that is very much in line with the data culture and making sure we're codifying project delivery so that we can actually derive the benefits that we want from the data. So, you know, in some senses, you're probably thinking this is all common sense. Good, because that's how it's meant to be. This is all common sense, because if it's not common sense, then there's something wrong. So that's the manifesto, and you know, there's the data analytics and AI government project delivery that Karina presented. You'll see a lot of parallels there, which again is excellent, because it all kind of just keeps reinforcing what we're talking about. And then, as Andy mentioned, there's various things you can get from the APM website. There's the getting started in project data and the developing the project data analytics skills, which are all freely downloadable. So I would encourage you to get those. And last but not least, you know, I do a weekly newsletter which is free, which you can subscribe to, which just tries to make sense of everything that's happening out there, because it is moving at such a pace. So that was a very, again, just conscious of time. Back over to you, Andy, for any questions.
Thank you, James. And we've got sort of just under 10 minutes to go through, I think, 35 questions. So we're not going to achieve that. But I did summarise a few sets that we had there before. So hopefully, I'll tell you what I'm going to do for this sort of panel bit. I'm going to call you Sensei White and Sensei Garner. There we go. So don't keep calling you James. Sensei White, and I'll do it the same. Sensei Alex as well. Would you like to come back on that one about the how do we deal with optimism bias? I know Karina, you might want to come in on that as well. With the it's a feature of some of the analysis on GMPP. But how do we get that culture of accepting what we're being told and not thinking that ours is going to be special and better than what's been done previously? So which of the senseis want to come in on that?
So I'll start first and throw a seed of thought in. The challenge with your question is that everybody is optimistic at the start of a project. You know, they're passionate about it, they're bought into it. You know, they'll be as positive and optimistic as they possibly can, because they want to get the business case signed off, and then they want to start delivering on it. And you know, delivering some of the first key milestones is something that you can show that you've delivered against. So that the challenge of not being optimistic and biased, as some people have put in the questions, is a challenge which is ingrained in trying to do the whole thing, to deliver a project in the first place, you know. And I think if we are all mindful of that, and clearly we can use AI to showcase us and the relevant people at the projects and program boards, that, you know, your optimism potentially might be showing this as a cost and time forecast. However, what do you think when AI is showing you this data? You know, are you being over optimistic? You know, take a thought and think about it.
Yeah, thanks, James. Alex, what were your thoughts on that? Because you brought out the culture bit, which is you've got to get the culture from top down right to to make good use of the insights that you're gaining.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a long time thinking about what's the earliest possible thing that you can predict on a project that almost doesn't guarantee you an outcome, but gives you the best fighting chance. And you can wait till a whole bunch of objective information lands on you through P6, through number of documents issued, whatever it happens to be. Probably the best, earliest insight that I can possibly think of is getting some good people in a room and ask them once a month, what do you think the outcomes are? And if you can do that anonymously through some sort of sentiment analysis, and there are apps out there that allow you to do this, it is a really, really good indicator about how you can actually tell the board that a project's in jeopardy. And actually grouping people by levels within organizations is a really good way of breaking through glass ceilings, breaking through the optimism bias. If you get a whole bunch of construction people, a whole bunch of project people at the same level saying what they think the outcomes are going to be on that project, do that anonymously and compare the different views. Projects should intervene where the sentiment gap is at the biggest, or it's had the biggest change month on month. It's a really powerful tool.
Yeah, and that sort of change, I think, is an interesting point, because it's telling you something new or something has happened which has changed that sentiment of people either working or affected by your project. So Karina, have you got thoughts on this? And there's a similar one that I think's been flagged for you as well, which is around us to sort of uncover the watermelon projects, where they're sort of green on the outside and deeply red on the inside when you start looking into them.
Absolutely. So yeah, really interesting, isn't it? Optimism bias. We are, as human beings, naturally optimistic, which is great, and so we just need to recognise that. But I think this is where data can come in handy, because if we are always optimistic and the outcomes are not as we had planned initially, we will always have a data set. We will always have some prior information about what actually happened versus what we thought would happen, and that's where benchmarking can absolutely come into play. and how we use information across portfolios, I think is a really key thing. It's something that we certainly want to experiment with, is how do we pull data together to say, this kilometre of road, it's why do you think you can do it in 800 pounds when every other kilometre of road has been done in 1200 pounds, for example? So by just having a benchmark and another objective place that you can go to, it just helps you ask the right questions. That's one way of doing it. The other thing I think we need to be conscious of is our role as leaders in this space, and we talk a lot in government about psychological safety, and that has come up through a number of programs actually, where people on the ground were saying that things were wrong, but the leadership wasn't listening to them. And we know that from some very big significant projects, including in MOD and including in the transport sector. And so we have a role then as leaders to make sure we are changing that culture and listening to that culture, so that we don't have watermelon projects. So two things from me is, have an objective data set that you can refer to, but also think about your leaders and how you build that psychological safety within the teams.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. There's a lot of questions around that sort of human aspect, and are we taking the human aspect away from our projects if we're using sort of generative AI to do lots of the tasks? But just taking that last bit about psychological safety, and if I can relate it back to James's Sensei White's data from the beginning, but that chart you showed, one of the things I took from that, it was 19% was the effectively the increased cost of that portfolio, or that work, but you also showed an 18% saving, and I assume that was through avoiding of waste and rework and dealing with the escalations and issues that occur in that work. So the truth will actually generate a better result than pretending it's not the truth as well. But from the well-being of those on projects, projects are unnecessarily stressful when we're all working to milestones that can't be hit, or reporting status that deep down we know isn't true. So there's a massive upside on the human factor of getting more truthful through better data analytics as well. There's some other questions, sort of quite specific ones. So James, one around sort of some of your examples. So Sensei Garner, so some of your questions around the generative AI. Can we use it to generate things like Gantt charts and sort of other sort of project management artifacts?
Yeah, I mean, what we've got to remember, a lot of this is in its infancy. So for everything that it can't do, maybe generating detailed Gantt charts, that will just be round the corner. But having said that, one of the things that, for instance, OpenAI have released is the ability to create your own GPTs, and it can now start analysing Gantt charts and making sense of charts and graphs, which is a huge leap forward, to be able to do that. But there are proprietary software, things like the nodes and link example that I showed, where it can start producing Gantt charts. So I think it's very, very new, this kind of technology, moving from text-based to the kind of being able to generate graphs and generate other kind of media. But it's going to get more and more common. And I think, as I said before, the rate of change is what's important. And I've almost got to the point now where when you think of a task that needs to be done, whatever that may be, it's worth just searching. But there's a site out there called Future.io, and it tries to keep track of all the different AI tools that are out there, and it's adding hundreds every day. So if it's not available now, I'd say that it will be available soon. But yes, most tasks in terms of project delivery, there'll be some kind of tool to use. Now, maybe some of them aren't perfect yet, but like I say, we're very much in the infancy. So I would encourage people to play around with these things, even if you're not for real on a project, just to see what the art of the possible is there.
Great, thank you, Sensei Garner. So I'm going to just squeeze. I know I'm in overtime, but this is just too good to stop here. So I'm going to have one last bit, and then I'll do a wrap up. But Sensei White, there's a couple of questions around the sort of the costs and the technical aspects, particularly in reference to the example that you provided, in terms of how integrated it is with the existing technology that a firm would be using. And there's another one from an SME to say, is this just sort of crowding out SMEs because it's going to require massive investment to make use of these? I'm assuming you didn't have a supercomputer to enable you to do that, and it was, you know, sort of as Garner said earlier on, sort of using more sort of off-the-shelf products and sort of integrating them together. So if you can do that, a really quick answer, that'd be great.
Sure. Using a common data environment to bring all of the different platforms, whether it's P6, project, all together to centralize that data is key, and that's not difficult to do in this day and age. Then when you've got that, you use the AI platform to interrogate all of that data, and then it produces what I've shown you in the previous slide. So it's the challenge is what some of the things that we've talked about is the security side of things, the cloud-based, but that's all part of the future that we're going. You know, we know the government uses cloud now, centrally based in the UK, not in the US. So it's all moving in the right direction.
Yeah, well, that's a great theme to finish on, in terms of we're all moving in the right direction. And I think the recent AI and data paper from IPA and in collaboration with others is sort of helping us move in the right direction, but together rather than doing it all on our own. So I think there's a lot to look forward to in this space, and we can see from some of the examples today how impactful it can be in terms of either improving productivity or just giving us that better sense of the reality rather than perhaps our over-optimistic view of the world, including mine. I was optimistic that we could do this session in an hour, and I should have realised we could never have done so. But I'll draw stumps here, and thank you very much. If we could show around appreciation for our panellists today, I think you've been brilliant, and it's really helped sort of advance this conversation and our thinking about how we can use it in the project world rather than just in other sectors or in our home life.
Thank you. Bye-bye.